My name is Emily, I am 30 years old, and just a few months ago, I thought I was on the path to my happily ever after. I had a ring on my finger, a date set, and a man who told me he wanted to spend forever with me. But life has a way of unraveling the things you hold onto the tightest, and in my case, the truth slipped out in the ugliest way possible. I met Ryan when I was 27. At the time, I had sworn off dating apps after a string of failed relationships that left me drained. But a friend convinced me to give it one more try, saying I had nothing to lose. Ryan was different, or at least that's what I told myself in the beginning. He was calm where others were chaotic, thoughtful where others had been careless. He worked as an architect, had a gentle smile, and carried himself with a kind of quiet confidence that made me believe he was grounded. The first few months were intoxicating. He planned thoughtful dates, picnics in the park, quiet dinners where we actually talked, and even once took me on a weekend trip to a small coastal town just because I said I loved the ocean. I felt seen in ways I hadn't before. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to picture a future with someone. And when he introduced me to his parents after just 4 months, I took it as a sign he was serious. Things progressed naturally. After a year, we moved in together. I remember the first night in our apartment, bare walls, unopened boxes, cheap takeout on the floor, and how happy I felt, like this was the first step toward building a real home. Ryan kissed me on the forehead that night and told me he could see us growing old together in that place. Fast forward another year and he proposed. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was intimate. He took me back to that same coastal town where we'd gone on our early trip. On the beach at sunset, with the waves crashing behind us, he pulled out a ring and asked if I'd be his wife. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest, and through tears, I said yes. It was one of those moments you lock away in your memory, a little snapshot of pure joy. The wedding planning was stressful, of course, but I kept reminding myself that the stress was temporary, while the marriage was what mattered. Ryan seemed invested too, though not in the details. He left most of the planning to me and my mom, shrugging whenever I asked for input on flowers, music, or the seating chart. He said, "I just want you. The rest doesn't matter." And I believed him, but looking back now, I realized there were cracks. Small ones at first. His phone face down more often than not, a certain tightness in his expression when old memories surfaced, the way he brushed off conversations about his past relationships. Whenever I asked about his last serious relationship, he would get vague, saying it ended years ago, and he didn't want to dwell on it. I assumed it was just a painful memory, and I respected that. As the wedding grew closer, those cracks widened. There were moments when I would catch him staring off into space, his expression unreadable. Once, I woke up in the middle of the night and found him sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone with this faraway look. He locked it quickly when he saw me, mumbling something about not being able to sleep. I tried to ignore the knot in my stomach, convincing myself it was just nerves about the wedding. Then came the night everything shattered. It was only 3 weeks before the wedding. We were at dinner, a simple evening at home with pasta and wine. I was excitedly telling him about the final fitting for my dress, how surreal it felt to picture myself walking down the aisle. Ryan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And then, almost out of nowhere, he put his fork down and said, "Emily, I need to tell you something." My heart dropped instantly. His tone was heavy, like he had been carrying this weight for too long. I braced myself, but nothing could have prepared me for his words. "I still love her." That was it. 3 words. 3 words that made my entire world tilt on its axis. I stared at him, not comprehending. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes avoiding mine. "My ex, Jessica. I thought I was over it. I thought I could move forward, but the truth is, I'm not. I've tried, Emily. I swear I've tried. But she's still in my heart." The silence that followed was deafening. My chest felt like it was caving in, and yet I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Here I was, weeks away from becoming his wife, and he was confessing that he was still in love with another woman. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand why he proposed, why he let me build dreams on lies, why he waited until now to rip the ground out from under me. But all I could do was sit there, numb, while tears blurred my vision. Finally, I managed to choke out, "So what now, Ryan? What do you expect me to do with this?" He looked broken, torn between guilt and longing. "I don't know. I just, I couldn't marry you without telling you the truth. You don't deserve that." And he was right. I didn't. But knowing that didn't stop the pain. That night, I slept in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every memory, every promise, every moment that now felt tainted. My fiancé, the man I thought was my forever, had just admitted that his heart never truly belonged to me, and deep down, I already knew what that meant. The morning after Ryan's confession felt surreal. I woke up in the guest room, though I barely slept. My eyes were swollen, my head heavy, and my chest ached like someone had placed a stone on it. The apartment, the same place where we once laughed while unpacking boxes and eating greasy takeout, suddenly felt like a stranger's home. I walked into the kitchen and found Ryan already there, staring into his coffee like it held the answers to his guilt. For a moment, he looked up, his lips parting as if he wanted to say something. But the words never came. Instead, silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. We moved around each other like strangers that day. He left for work without a kiss, without a goodbye, just the soft thud of the door closing behind him. I sat at the kitchen table long after he was gone, staring at the engagement ring still on my finger. It sparkled in the morning light, mocking me. This symbol of love and commitment now felt like a chain tethering me to a lie. I thought about calling my mom, but I couldn't. How could I tell her that the wedding she was so excited about might not happen? She had been my biggest supporter, running through flower arrangements and guest lists with me, spending hours helping me choose between shades of ivory and cream. My mom wanted this wedding almost as much as I did. Breaking her heart with the truth felt unbearable, so instead, I called my best friend, Claire. She was the kind of person who could hear a tremor in my voice and know something was wrong. The moment she answered, I broke down, sobbing into the phone as I told her what Ryan had admitted. There was a long silence on her end, then a sharp inhale. "Emily, oh my God. I don't even know what to say. He told you he still loves his ex?" Weeks before the wedding. "Yes," I whispered. "I don't know what to do." Claire didn't sugarcoat things, and that was exactly what I needed. "You can't marry him. You know that, right? You deserve someone who loves you completely, not someone with one foot stuck in the past." Her words pierced me, because deep down, I already knew she was right. But the thought of walking away terrified me. I had invested years into this relationship, shared a home, built dreams. And beyond that, what would people think? Invitations had already been sent out, deposits paid, arrangements made. Canceling a wedding felt like announcing my humiliation to the entire world. When Ryan came home that evening, I tried to confront him. I needed clarity, some kind of explanation that would make sense of the mess inside my heart. "Ryan, I need to know," I said, standing in the living room while he hovered near the door. "Why propose to me if you're still in love with her?" He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a man on trial. "Because I thought I could move on, Emily. I thought loving you would erase what I felt for Jessica. I convinced myself I was ready, that I wanted this life with you. And part of me still does. But no matter how hard I try, she's always there in the back of my mind." Tears burned my eyes. "Do you realize what you've done to me? To us? You let me plan a wedding, choose a dress, invite our families. Only to tell me this now? You've stolen years of my life, Ryan." He flinched at my words, his face etched with regret. "I never wanted to hurt you. I swear. But lying to you, marrying you while feeling this way, that would be worse." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand that he take it back. But instead, I felt myself unravel, the weight of betrayal too heavy to carry. I sank onto the couch, clutching my head in my hands. Ryan sat across from me, his own eyes glassy. "Emily, I don't know what to do. I don't want to lose you, but I also can't lie about what I feel. I don't even know if Jessica wants me back, but..." I snapped my head up, fury cutting through the fog. "You don't even know if she wants you?" And you're still willing to risk everything we built? That says it all, Ryan. You've already chosen her, even if she hasn't chosen you. The silence after that was unbearable. Eventually, he retreated to the bedroom while I stayed on the couch. Our apartment, once filled with warmth, was now divided into invisible walls. Every room echoed with absence, every glance between us a reminder of the gulf that had opened. That night, I slid the engagement ring off my finger. I held it in my palm, staring at the way it caught the dim light, then placed it on the coffee table. My finger felt strangely bare, but also freed, and I didn't know what the next day would bring. But one thing was clear. The fairy tale I had built in my head was over. And now I had to find the strength to face reality. The next morning, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror for a long time. My eyes were puffy, my hair a mess, but it wasn't vanity that kept me frozen there. It was the realization that I had to start telling people. Secrets this big don't stay buried, and if I didn't take control of the story, it would consume me. The first call had to be to my mom. My hands trembled as I dialed her number, and when her cheerful voice answered, my throat nearly closed. "Sweetheart, how are you? How's my bride-to-be?" she asked, her tone bubbling with excitement. I swallowed hard. "Mom, we need to talk." The silence on the line was immediate and heavy. "Emily, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice lowering. I tried to be gentle, but there was no soft way to say it. "Ryan told me he's still in love with his ex. I don't think the wedding can happen." Her gasp was sharp, followed by disbelief.
What?
"Are you serious? After all this time, after everything, he says this now?" Hearing the anger in her voice made me cry harder. My mom was protective of me, and I knew this news was breaking her heart, not just for me, but for everything she had helped plan. "I don't know what to do, Mom. I feel like my whole life just collapsed." She was quiet for a moment, then firm. "You do what's best for you. Don't you dare marry a man who can't give you his whole heart. I don't care if the invitations are out or if the flowers are ordered. None of that matters compared to your happiness." Her words steadied me, even as the ache in my chest deepened. We talked a little longer, and she promised she would help me handle the fallout, no matter how messy it got. The harder part was telling everyone else. I dreaded the calls, the explanations, the pity in people's voices. Claire came over that evening, armed with wine and her usual bluntness. She sat cross-legged on my couch, staring at the engagement ring I had placed on the table. "You know," she said, sipping her drink, "you could keep this really simple. Send out a message that says, 'Wedding's off, groom's an idiot. Thanks for understanding. Done.'" I actually laughed through my tears, which felt like the first real laugh in days. But of course, it wasn't that simple. Canceling a wedding meant canceling venues, caterers, florists, all with deposits already paid. It meant telling friends and extended family, many of whom had already booked flights or taken time off work. The humiliation alone was crushing. When Ryan came home that night, I told him flatly, "We need to call it off." He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping. "I'll take care of calling my family. You shouldn't have to deal with them." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He looked small, defeated. But then I remembered, this was his doing. He had detonated our lives with one confession, and now both of us were left sifting through the wreckage. The next week was chaos. My mom and I went down the list of vendors, making cancellations, begging for partial refunds, dealing with contracts that made it clear we wouldn't see most of our money again.
Thousands of dollars gone.
It stung, but strangely, I didn't care as much as I thought I would. Money can be earned again. My peace of mind couldn't. The calls to friends and relatives were harder. Some were supportive, telling me I was brave for walking away. Others were nosy, wanting every sordid detail. A few even suggested maybe I was overreacting, that all men have baggage and I should reconsider. Those comments cut deeply, but I stood my ground. One conversation stood out. Ryan's mother called me directly, her voice trembling. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was still hung up on Jessica. If I did, I would have stopped him from proposing." Her words shocked me. "You knew about her?" I asked. She sighed. "Of course. She was his first great love. It ended badly, and I thought he had moved on. But I guess some wounds never heal. Still, you're doing the right thing. You deserve better. Her support was unexpected, and it both comforted me and made me ache even more. Everyone seemed to agree I was making the right choice, but that didn't make the loneliness easier to bear. Nights were the worst. I would lie awake in the empty bed, haunted by memories of what could have been. And yet, in the middle of the grief, something shifted. One evening, after canceling yet another vendor, I sat on the couch with Claire. She looked at me seriously and said, "Emily, this isn't the end of your story. It's just the end of a chapter. Don't let him be the full book." Her words stayed with me. And slowly, I began to realize she was right. This heartbreak wasn't the end of my life. It was the painful beginning of something else, something I hadn't yet defined, but something that belonged wholly to me. The days after the wedding was officially canceled blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and grief. I moved through them mechanically, answering phone calls, signing cancellation papers, and writing apologetic emails. But inside, I felt hollow. Everywhere I turned, reminders of the life I almost had seemed to mock me. My wedding dress hung untouched in the garment bag in the corner of my bedroom. The invitations, carefully printed with calligraphy and gold trim, still sat in a box by the door, waiting to be mailed out to the last few guests. I couldn't bring myself to look at them. Ryan and I barely spoke. We existed in the same apartment, but lived in different worlds. He slept in the bedroom. I slept on the couch. Sometimes, I caught him glancing at me with guilt written all over his face, but he never tried to fix what he had broken. And truthfully, I didn't want him to. I didn't want apologies anymore. I wanted the life I had been promised, and he couldn't give it to me. After a week, I knew I couldn't keep living like that. I needed space. I packed a suitcase, filled it with clothes and essentials, and called my mom. She drove over within the hour, her face tight with worry as she helped me load the bag into her car. Leaving that apartment was harder than I thought. Every corner held memories: our first Christmas together, movie nights with takeout, mornings with coffee and sleepy kisses. As I closed the door behind me, I felt like I was leaving behind not just a home, but the version of myself who believed in forever with Ryan. My mom's house. I finally collapsed. She made me tea, tucked me into my old bedroom, and let me cry until there were no tears left. It felt like stepping back in time, like being a teenager after a heartbreak, except this pain was deeper, sharper, more permanent. The days stretched on. I avoided social media, knowing the questions and comments would be relentless. Instead, I filled my time with small tasks, helping my mom in the garden, cleaning out old boxes in the attic, cooking dinners together. The simplicity of it all felt healing in a strange way, but healing is never linear. Some nights, I found myself scrolling through old photos of Ryan and me, smiling on the beach, at family gatherings in our apartment. I would study the way he looked at me, searching for signs of the truth I had missed. Did he love me then? Or was Jessica always in his heart, even when he held me? The questions gnawed at me, and I knew I might never get the answers. Claire visited often, refusing to let me sink too deep into despair. One evening, she dragged me out for drinks, insisting I needed to re-enter the world. At first, I resisted, but eventually, I gave in. Sitting at that bar, surrounded by laughter and music, I realized how much I had lost of myself in the chaos. For so long, I had defined myself as Ryan's fiancé, as the future Mrs. Something. Without that, I felt stripped bare, but also strangely free. That night, after Claire dropped me off, I stood outside under the stars, the cool air brushing against my skin. For the first time in weeks, I let myself imagine a future without Ryan. A life where I wasn't tethered to his ghosts, his indecision, his half-love. A life that belonged entirely to me. It was terrifying. But it was also liberating. The next morning, I called Ryan. My voice was steady as I told him I was moving out permanently. The lease was in both our names, but I didn't care. He could have the apartment. I didn't want it anymore. He was quiet for a long time before finally saying, "I'm sorry, Emily, for everything." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of all the words I could have said, how his apology was too late, how sorry didn't erase the years or the pain. But instead, I simply said, "Goodbye, Ryan." And with that, I hung up. It felt like closing a book, one I had clung to even after the story had turned sour. Now, with trembling hands, I was ready to set it down and reach for something new. The road ahead was uncertain, and I knew the scars would stay with me for a long time. But for the first time since his confession, I felt a glimmer of strength inside me, a small, steady flame that whispered, "You will survive this. And one day, you'll be whole again." Life after Ryan wasn't just about healing, it was about learning how to face the world again. It amazed me how quickly whispers traveled. Within days of calling off the wedding, people I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out. Some messages were kind, filled with sympathy and encouragement. Others were laced with curiosity, thinly veiled gossip disguised as concern. I learned fast who my true friends were. Claire never left my side. My mom was my rock. But others? They disappeared as soon as the drama settled. It stung at first, realizing how conditional some friendships were, but it also gave me clarity. In times of crisis, masks fall away. One of the hardest parts was going back to work. My coworkers had been excited about my upcoming wedding. They'd even thrown me a little bridal shower in the office weeks earlier. When I walked into the office without my ring, I felt the shift immediately. Conversations quieted, eyes darted, people tried not to stare. Eventually, one brave coworker asked softly, "Emily, are you okay?" I forced a smile. "I will be." It became my mantra. I will be okay. Not now, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. Still, there were moments that tested me. Like running into acquaintances at the grocery store, people who hadn't yet heard. They'd beam at me and ask, "How's the wedding planning?" And I'd have to paste on a polite smile and say, "There is no wedding anymore." Watching their faces twist with shock or pity felt like reliving the heartbreak all over again. But the worst moment came when I unexpectedly saw Ryan in public. It was at a coffee shop I used to love, a cozy little place where we'd spent countless mornings together. I was there with Claire, sipping a latte, when he walked in. My stomach dropped instantly. He looked thinner, paler, his eyes tired. He spotted me and froze. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the room, the air thick with everything unsaid. He gave me a weak smile, almost apologetic, and I looked away. My hands trembled as I clutched my cup. Claire leaned in, whispering fiercely, "Do not you dare give him the satisfaction of seeing you cry." I nodded, biting my lip, willing myself to stay strong. Ryan ordered his coffee and left quickly, and I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Seeing him was like reopening the wound, but it also reminded me of why I had walked away. His presence no longer felt like home. It felt like poison. After that encounter, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let him control my life anymore. If I wanted coffee at that shop, I'd go. If I wanted to visit places we once loved, I wouldn't avoid them just because of memories. This was my life too, and I refused to keep shrinking it for the sake of avoiding pain. Slowly, I started reclaiming little pieces of myself. I signed up for a yoga class, something I had always wanted to try, but never did because Ryan wasn't interested. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected while caught up in the relationship. I even booked a solo weekend trip to the mountains, just to prove to myself that I could still find joy without someone by my side. It wasn't easy. There were nights when loneliness wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wishing things had turned out differently. But there were also mornings when I woke up with a strange sense of peace, realizing that my worst fear, losing him, had already happened, and I was still here, and maybe, just maybe, I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. One evening, as I sat on the porch at my mom's house watching the sunset, she came out and handed me a cup of tea. She sat beside me, her hand warm on mine. "You know, Emily," she said softly, "sometimes life takes away what we think we want to make space for what we really need. You may not see it now, but this pain won't last forever. One day, you'll look back and realize this was the moment you found yourself again." Her words sank deep into my heart. I didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was right. Even as I tried to rebuild my life, the what-ifs haunted me. They crept into my thoughts during quiet moments, while driving alone, folding laundry, or lying in bed at night. What if Ryan had never confessed? What if we had gone through with the wedding, and I only discovered the truth years later, maybe after kids were involved? What if he had chosen me fully instead of clinging to a ghost? Those questions were like shadows, following me wherever I went. And yet, as painful as they reminded me of something important. I had been spared a bigger heartbreak. Ryan's truth destroyed me, yes, but it also freed me from living a lie. Still, moving on wasn't linear. There were days I felt strong, convinced I was finally letting go. And then there were days when I would smell his cologne on an old sweater or hear a song that reminded me of him, and I'd crumble all over again. Healing, I realized, wasn't a straight road. It was a tangled maze. One evening, I sat with Claire in her apartment, sipping wine and scrolling through her phone. She nudged me, showing me a picture of a guy she thought I might like. "You're not dead, Em. You're allowed to date again someday," she teased. I laughed bitterly. Someday, maybe. But right now, I can't imagine letting someone that close again. I gave Ryan everything, and he still chose someone else. Claire grew serious. He didn't choose someone else, Emily. He chose to stay stuck in his past. That's not your failure, it's his. Don't carry his brokenness like it's yours. Her words hit me hard. I had been blaming myself without realizing it, wondering if I hadn't been enough, if maybe I could have loved him better, harder, differently. But deep down, I knew Claire was right. Ryan's inability to let go of Jessica wasn't about me. It was about him. Not long after, I had an unexpected encounter that cemented that truth. I ran into Jessica. It happened at a bookstore downtown. I was browsing when I heard someone say my name. I turned, and there she was, the woman whose shadow had loomed over my relationship. She was pretty, in a quiet, understated way, with kind eyes that made my stomach twist. "You're Emily, right?" she asked cautiously. I nodded, my heart pounding.
Yes.
"And you're Jessica," she finished for me, offering a small smile. "I'm sorry if this is awkward. I heard about what happened. Ryan told me." My throat went dry. "He told you?" She nodded, looking uncomfortable.
Yeah.
"He reached out a few weeks ago. I told him we were done for good, that I'd moved on."
I guess he didn't take it well.
I had no idea he was engaged until after. Her words were like a punch and a relief all at once. Ryan had risked everything for her, and she didn't even want him back. Jessica hesitated, then added softly, "For what it's worth, I think you're brave." Walking away couldn't have been easy.
I didn't know what to say.
Part of me wanted to hate her, to blame her, but standing there, I realized she wasn't the villain in my story. Ryan was. He had clung to her memory, twisted it into something bigger than it was, and in doing so, destroyed what we had. We parted ways politely, and I walked out of that bookstore with my heart pounding but lighter somehow. Seeing Jessica, hearing from her own lips that she had moved on, was the closure I hadn't known I needed. That night, I sat on the porch again, staring at the stars. For the first time, I felt a strange sense of gratitude. Gratitude that Ryan had confessed before vows were exchanged. Gratitude that Jessica had been clear enough to shut the door on his lingering hope. Gratitude that, despite the pain, I had been given a chance to rewrite my future before it was too late. The what-ifs would always linger, I knew. But slowly, I was learning to let them go. Time is strange after heartbreak. At first, every day felt endless, like I was dragging my pain from sunrise to sunset. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the days began to lighten. I laughed more often, I slept more peacefully, and the thought of Ryan no longer crushed me. It just lingered like a faint scar. One morning, months after the canceled wedding, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about him at all the day before. That realization made me cry, not out of sadness, but relief. Healing had been creeping in quietly, without me even noticing. I threw myself into rediscovering who I was outside of being someone's fiancé. I traveled, even if just for short trips. I picked up hobbies I neglected: painting, journaling, hiking. I started saying yes to things I had once put off because Ryan wouldn't enjoy them. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, not for someone else's comfort, but of course, there were still triggers. Weddings were the hardest. The first time I attended one after calling off my own, I almost backed out. Watching the bride walk down the aisle, radiant and loved, brought a lump to my throat. But as I looked closer, I realized something. Her joy didn't diminish mine. Just because my story hadn't gone as planned didn't mean I would never have my moment. It just meant it wasn't then. Friends began hinting about dating again, but I wasn't in a rush. I knew now that my worth wasn't defined by being chosen. For too long, I had equated love with validation. Ryan's betrayal forced me to rebuild that foundation, brick by brick, until I understood that I was whole on my own. Point one evening, sitting with Claire over dinner, she raised her glass and said, "To new beginnings." I clinked mine against hers and smiled. To never settling for half a heart again. And I meant it. Ryan had once been my dream, but in the end, he taught me something more valuable than love. He taught me the importance of honesty, of self-respect, of walking away when someone cannot give you the love you deserve. Life wasn't perfect, and the road ahead was uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, I was breathing freely again. And that, to me, was everything. And that's my story. If you've listened all the way until now, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know how heavy and painful these stories can feel, but I hope mine reminds you of something important. Walking away from someone who cannot love you fully is not weakness, it's strength. If you're going through something similar, know this: you are not alone. Your worth is not measured by whether someone chooses you. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. If this story touched you, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means the world, and it helps me continue to bring you more stories like this one. Until next time, take care of your heart and never settle for less than the love you deserve.